Well, hello there. It's Take Two with Jerry and Debbie on EWTN Radio. Along with Debbie Georgiani and the show team, I am Jerry Usher. Glad that you have made time to be with us for part or all of this program, which, Debbie, I believe is going to be very, very fascinating, because today we're going to have a guest on who's going to talk about a subject that a lot of people think about a lot. They give some thought to. They wonder, does these kinds of things still happen? And when they hear about things, they get very, very interested in them.
Our listeners have asked on numerous occasions about miracles and what what books they can read on miracles, and we suggest on take2show.com, our website, a reference list of books that we recommend, and one of them is Joan Carroll Cruz's Eucharistic Miracles. And miracles are a very important thing to understand, and also if you've experienced a miracle, what makes a miracle, church approved miracles. And so again, our listeners have asked and asked and asked, and we provided that reference list of books that people can read. But now there is a new book from our friend Adam Blai, The Catholic Guide to Miracles. It just came out this week. It's available on EWTNRC.com, the religious catalog. It's amazing, Jerry, and he goes into all the different angles, even in a similar way as Joan Carroll Cruz, but even in a more practical way, if you will, of how we should view miracles. I'm super excited about having him this entire hour. It is a recorded broadcast, folks, so we're not taking any calls today. We get to spend the entire hour asking Adam Blai about his new book.
That's right. Again, EWTNRC.com is the place to go to get a copy of the book, for not only for yourself, but for others whom you think might enjoy and learn from it. Adam Blai, by the way, is a layman. He is a church-decreed expert in religious demonology and exorcism for the Diocese of Pittsburgh. He has also served as an expert in these areas in training priests, deacons, and laity in many other dioceses, and he is currently working in the Tribunal of the Pittsburgh Diocese and is pursuing a canon law degree. So we're going to get to Adam here in just a few minutes. But Debbie, let's take a look at what's inside the covers of these books for our listeners so they know what we're going to be talking with Adam about.
Well, Jerry, I know you're going to share some of the chapters, but I just want to share with our Take Two family. I was speaking with Gigi, our Inspired by Faith book and fellowship club facilitator. She is amazing. And Gigi has put the Catholic Guide to Miracles on the list, I believe, this summer or late this summer for our book club. There's 350 participants to take on the book and really spend the whole month diving into miracles. And so, folks, if you want to join the book club, it's so simple. Go to standtalltoday.com, click the book tab and the book club tab, and join us. It's an online Facebook club, and it's growing by the minute, Jerry. And I'm super excited that we're going to be taking on the Catholic Guide to Miracles.
Well, yeah, and I've got to also say, while you're at standtalltoday.com, look at the different life coaches that we have, a team of professional certified life coaches. If you feel like, if you believe that having someone, kind of a thought partner, walking alongside of you in this stage of your life, helping you maybe move forward in certain areas of your life where you're a little bit stuck, consultations are free, absolutely free. They're at standtalltoday.com, and definitely join the Inspired by Faith Book and Fellowship Club. You'll see the tab for that right at the top of the page. But yeah, Debbie, there's so much to chew on in this book. It's absolutely amazing. And Adam starts, of course, at the beginning. He talks about the history of miracles and their definitions, and then he gets into miracles like healing miracles, apparitions of Mary, which he refers to as miracles involving St. Michael the Archangel, stigmata, the incorruptibles, levitation, Eucharistic miracles. Maybe we can just touch each one of these and just kind of spend 15 seconds fleshing them out so our listeners know what we're talking about.
Okay, and I wanted to share that at the end, towards the end of the broadcast, we're going to get into the counterfeit, how to identify counterfeit situations and things that we could experience that could be something else. It's very interesting, folks. That's why you got to stay tuned in for this entire broadcast. Jerry, what do you want to tackle first?
Well, just in order, chapter 2 talks about miraculous healings, and we hear about these often in connection to the beatification or canonization of a man or a woman who becomes a saint in the church. And also for those of us who had the blessing to go to Lourdes, France, there is a special wall there that they have where people's crutches and wheelchairs and walkers and things have been left behind because they've received miraculous healings at Lourdes from the Lourdes water there, Debbie. So that's still, miraculous healings are still happening today.
Let me ask you this question. In almost 6 years we've been doing Take Two, how many times do you think it has come up? I mean, I was trying to think about it last night, and I would say it's got to be in the hundreds of emails we've received about people wanting us to talk about miracles, or they wanted to share their experience or observation of miracles. Would you say that's a conservative figure?
I would say yes, absolutely. We do hear from people. The Take Two family is so open and honest about discussing things about their lives, wanting to know about our lives and these experiences that we have and how we can all relate to them. So you're absolutely right. I mentioned that Adam gets into the apparitions of Mary. A lot of people generally know what those are considered to be. Miracles involving St. Michael, the Archangel. These are fascinating. That's chapter 4. Chapter 5, the Stigmata, which is, as you know, why don't you just explain for Padre Pio, one of your favorites, had the Stigmata.
Yeah, it's the wounds of Christ. And in Padre Pio's case, they would constantly open, they constantly reopen, and it was painful. And also he suffered a tremendous amount of humiliation from people around him because they didn't know what to make of it, and they didn't want it to be a public, attraction or distraction, right? And so the Padre Pio receiving this great gift of the Stigmata. We know that St. Francis of Assisi and others have received it as well, but Padre Pio went through a lot to deal with receiving this, the wounds of Christ. He went through a lot of, personal attacks, and it's when you read about his story, you really, wow, you go, I don't know if I could endure that, right, Jerry?
Yeah, many saints' bodies are partially incorrupt. Some saints have levitated, and we have many Eucharistic miracles throughout the world. We're going to talk about the Catholic Guide to Miracles with Adam Blai on Take Two with Jerry and Debbie. Coming right up. Please stay with us.
We're speaking with our friend, religious demonologist Adam Blai, about his new book, The Catholic Guide to Miracles. Oh, great title for the book. But real quickly, Jerry and Adam, if I may, just for our listeners, I want to highlight EWTN Religious Catalog. EWTN Religious Catalog is your online destination for Catholic books, DVDs, rosaries, devotionals, holy reminders, and more. Buy Catholic, shop EWTNRC.com today, and receive regular emails featuring items for purchase online at the EWTN Religious Catalog store. You can get rosaries, artwork, books, jewelry, and other holy reminders. Visit EWTN.com and click on subscribe. I did. Did you, Jerry?
Oh, yes. I always do those things with EWTN. It's great information, great news, the stuff at the Religious Catalog and all about their programs on radio and TV. So, yeah, it's just an easy way to get reminded about what's going on at EWTN.
Awesome. So back with Adam Blai, the author of the newest book from Sophia Institute Press, The Catholic Guide to Miracles, Separating the Authentic from the Counterfeit. Adam, share with us, how did you come up with this book? What prompted you to write this book? And have you noticed in your work as a religious demonologist, have you noticed in your work that there's a lot of counterfeits out there, that people are attributing those to miracles?
Yeah, Debbie. I wrote this book primarily because I wanted to kind of discuss the other side of the coin from, the preternatural things and the tricks and the kind of scary things that the enemy sometimes does. I wanted to focus on the good things that God does that are signs for us. But as we think about that and look into it, we have to realize that claims of miracles have been misused down through history many, many times by many people. And sometimes it's just mental illness or a misunderstanding, but then some people are holding out, claiming to have miraculous powers of healing and taking people's money for that. And then there also are tricks of the enemy that try to draw us into heresy and misunderstandings about the spiritual world by giving us false miracles. So, I wanted to talk about the classic miracles and some of the modern ones, but I also wanted to give a sober warning about, some of the harm that can be done with those ideas.
Well, and Adam, we know God is still in the miracle business. A lot of people think that miracles ended, at the in the New Testament era or what have you. But obviously, the Church relies on miracles to beatify and canonize people. So, talk about how God really still does legitimately work miracles in our day.
Oh, sure, Jerry. In the process of beatification and canonization of declaring a person a saint, the Church looks for miracles that have happened when people pray for the intercession of that saint, when people ask that saint to pray for them or intercede to God. The Church looks for those verifiable miracles as a proof of being blessed and then of being a saint. And when the Church looks for those, they almost always look for healings because those are the ones that we can objectively test and verify. And those healings, it's not just that a person's healed, but there's very specific criteria. The bar is set very high for that. But those healings, they occur to this day. There's healings at Lourdes just from, the effect of the water at Lourdes. There are documented healings if you start researching the canonization of recent saints, recent canonizations of saints. There's contemporary miracles happening on a regular basis. So certainly, those are occurring in our lifetime. Eucharistic miracles continue to occur. One of them was supervised by Pope Francis when he was Archbishop in South America. So yeah, certainly it's not something that only appears in the Bible.
Take Two with Jerry and Debbie, and our guest is Adam Blai, a religious demonologist who also trains priests in the rite of exorcism. He is employed by the Diocese of Pittsburgh. And the book is The Catholic Guide to Miracles. Debbie and I each are, I'm sure, holding our copy of the book right now. And as Debbie mentioned, it's from Sophia Institute Press. And we want to make sure that you folks are listening. Where to get this book. Go to EWTNRC.com. If you're curious, this is a fascinating book. I think it will help you, just edify you right on the surface, and then maybe help to clear up some misunderstandings you might have about miracles and the nature of them. So go to EWTNRC.com. That's the religious catalog at EWTN. That's EWTNRC.com.
Adam, in the work that you do on a regular basis, would you say that miracles are happening all around us and we don't even really, give it much attention or acknowledgement or something of that nature? Or is it, are we to look for just the real big miracles?
I think when we talk about miracles, we're thinking of the big ones, kind of even without realizing it. The anecdotal things that we all hear about are, somebody's sick or they're in treatment and nothing's working and the doctors have exhausted the medical remedies. And then a lot of people pray and the person recovers. That's the anecdote that we hear the most commonly. But the Church generally doesn't, go into that and start investigating and spending the time to figure out if that was miraculous or just a spontaneous recovery. So the big miracles, the kind of things that would be used in a canonization do certainly still happen, but I wouldn't say that they're happening all the time around us. Now, that's not to say that miracles aren't happening all the time around us. It's just the dramatic ones I don't think are, as common. But, we don't have time to unpack it here, but we would be going back to Thomas Aquinas and going back to how he parsed out miracles and, parsed out the activity of God, the extraordinary activity of God which isn't always the big dramatic action. Sometimes it's a very subtle and quiet action that not many people know about, but it's still a miracle. So, yeah, I would say that the action of God is all but continuous around us, but what we mean when we say miracle is usually something very dramatic. And I think for most of us, miracles are a private matter, things that we suspect were the action of God or the answer to prayers, but they're not necessarily put out there for the world. And that may be changing a little bit in the social media age that we live in. But I think, many of the miracles are more subtle.
Mm-hmm. Adam Blai is our guest on Take Two with Jerry and Debbie. We appreciate you tuning into this broadcast, and we're talking about Adam's book, The Catholic Guide to Miracles, just published by Sophia Institute Press. You can get a copy at EWTNRC.com. And you mentioned earlier, Adam, with regard to a person's road to beatification and canonization, that usually the Church will look at a miracle of healing because those are easiest to verify. But what are some of the other, I'd say, categories of miracles that you get into in this book?
Well, Eucharistic miracles, I think, are in a sense the most important for the Catholic Christian, because they point to the reality of the Eucharist as body, blood, and soul and divinity of Jesus Christ. There's the many Marian apparitions, of which most people are familiar with a few, but in reality there's been many down through time. Those sometimes can be, I think, important and interesting, and they usually speak to the time and place that they occur. There's some of the dramatic ones that are less common, like levitation, which has actually happened, with a number of saints, usually more in private settings, except for Joseph of Cupertino, who it was very public, and that was unusual. And there's also the stigmata, I would say, is kind of a delicate topic. And it certainly causes a strong reaction. When we think of Padre Pio and the stigmata, it's kind of a very personal part of people that bear the stigmata and experience that. But it also points back to the reality of Jesus and his sacrifice. So, yeah, those are a few examples.
Wow. Adam, how long did it take you to put this together, this book?
Well, I've been working on different parts of it, I would say, for a little over a year before the writing was finished. But, I've had some experience where I've been asked to look into miracles here. People have claimed to have a particular miraculous experience. So I've looked into a few things and, kept notes and reflected on those and got to study the church documents about miracles. And that just fed into my thinking, and eventually the book came about.
This is Take Two with Jerry and Debbie. Our guest is Adam Blai, a religious demonologist in the employ of the Diocese of Pittsburgh. He also trains priests in exorcism on a national level. We're talking about his outstanding new book, The Catholic Guide to Miracles, which, again, you can get at the EWTN Religious Catalog, EWTNRC.com. And, Adam, you actually have a chapter in the book, Demonic Counterfeits. Those who think they're experiencing something miraculous, we're called to test all spirits, by Scripture. So what do you have to say about counterfeits and how sometimes people fall prey to those thinking they're legitimate miracles?
Well, Jerry, it's a small percentage of things, but one thing we have to guard against is when it's the enemy purporting to be something holy. There's anecdotal accounts at Marian apparition sites where there would be kind of a false apparition that would try to usurp the site and distract people. That has happened a few times. And I think the main area that's useful for us, just the common people living in our age, is to realize that not all locutions or purported prophecies are of God. And the big way to discriminate, I think, between what is perhaps from God and what likely isn't, is when a person submits themselves in their visions or locutions to the judgment of their bishop and then is obedient to that judgment. And that judgment usually includes making sure the person isn't, mentally unstable, but then most importantly, comparing what they're saying that God is telling them with the magisterium and the teaching of the church. And so when somebody's deviating into heresy and non-Christian ideas and trying to draw people away from the teaching of the church, you can basically be sure that that's either their just personal delusion or it's a trick of the enemy. And so, in the end, Jerry, it's the same thing that Jesus said, judge things by their fruits. So when you see demonic counterfeit manifestations in the world, they lead to confusion, they lead to division, they lead to sadness, and they lead away from God. And so ultimately the church looks over time at these things.
Wow. There's a lot here, Adam, and we're trying to unpack it in this short hour that we get to spend with one another. But let me ask you this question. Who do you recommend this book to? I mean, would it be catechists, families, priests? I mean, is it for everyone? Could teenagers? I haven't gotten through the entire book. I said this at the beginning of the show, folks, just so you know. This is going to be a bestseller. It is amazing. Adam did a great job on this. It's a must-have book. Go to EWTNRC.com. Get your book today. Please do it. But Adam, who do you recommend this book for?
Well, Debbie, and I'm not saying this to try to sell books at all, but I think there is kind of a broad usefulness to it. I think a catechist, to be able to answer questions about how does the church define miracles, how did Thomas Aquinas define them, it could be useful to that person. I think for the curious who have heard about Marian apparitions but want to get a little more detail, the general interest, it could be good there. I think most priests have heard most of these things, but sometimes it can be good to look at kind of the critical and discriminating view that I try to take, particularly with the deceptions and just the bad human actors that can get involved in miracles, because these are powerful, powerful ideas that can be misused. And so that's an angle that I don't think many people have tried to unpack. So that could be useful for a priest, especially if they're trying to work with somebody who's claiming to have miraculous experiences. And then finally, Debbie, I think in our age, there's a lot of self-proclaimed prophets on the internet that like to post things for attention and say that God showed them or told them something in a dream, and everybody needs to follow their kind of apocalyptic timeline that they're talking about. And that can be confusing for people that have never thought through how does a church discern these things. So, yeah, I think there's quite a few people it could be useful for.
Adam, got about 30 seconds before we pause, and we'll hear the music leading up to that. But should people be looking for or asking God for miracles in their lives, or should we just kind of, not try to, actively venture into that territory?
No, I think it's fine to ask for miracles, especially, miracles to help a person or to, if you're praying for a loved one, praying for yourself. It's completely fine to ask for these things. Just understand that God knows us better than we know ourselves, and don't feel upset if God doesn't give you a miracle immediately. God's timing is different than ours, and God's understanding of our situation is beyond our own.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, Adam, we have more that we're going to get into with you, so folks, please stay with us on this recorded episode of Take Two with Jerry and Debbie. Adam Blai is our guest, a religious demonologist, talking about his new book, The Catholic Guide to Miracles. Stay with us. And we thank you again for being with us on this special Pre-recorded broadcast of Take Two with Jerry and Debbie. Our guest is Adam Blai. He is a layman, but is a church-decreed expert in religious demonology and exorcism for the Diocese of Pittsburgh. He's also studying to get a degree in canon law. He trains priests around the world in the church's rite of exorcism. And we're talking with Adam's newly released book. That's right, you can get it now. It's called The Catholic Guide to Miracles, and we encourage you to go to EWTNRC.com right away. Go soon and get your copy of this book, The Catholic Guide to Miracles. Deb?
Adam, at the beginning of the show, we were talking about one of our favorite books, and that's Joan Carroll Cruz's Eucharistic Miracles. And she goes into it's very dense book, amazing book, real in-depth on Eucharistic miracles. I noticed that in your new book that was just released this week, The Catholic Guide to Miracles, you talk about Eucharistic miracles. Did you take it from the similar angle as Joan Carroll Cruz, or is this a whole different new spin on Eucharistic miracles?
Well, I don't think there's really any new spin on them. They've always been the same down through the years. I think the only two ways you could approach it would be to try to dismiss the people that have provided objective analysis of it, the medical doctors that the church has gone to that are kind of impartial. The only thing you could do is try to dismiss them and ignore their testimony. So, what I'm trying to do in the book is present a few of the cases, not as many as she did, because we're trying to explore all the types of miracles. So a few of them with some thoughts about the implications of those and kind of the scriptural place that kind of, spoke about the Eucharist, the institution of the Eucharist that leads up and makes the miracles make sense, and then sharing a little bit that I've personally experienced in my life. So, it's an affirmation of these miracles as seen through the eyes of the medical professionals that have validated them.
Do you have any sense, Adam, about why the church doesn't, I guess, for lack of a better way of putting it, make more out of these miracles that we're talking about on this program? Because you have a lot of non-Catholic Christians, non-Christians, people who don't believe in God or anything. And when you come to them with the Bible and the Catechism and papal writings and all of this, they're like, oh, phooey, But if you were to come to them and say, this little piece of bread turned into actual human flesh, they've tested it, the wine turned into blood, they have the blood type. I mean, some of these things could be, I think, maybe help people get a little bit over their hesitation to consider Catholicism.
Well, Jerry, I think the church has been open about these cases, and often it's years after they happen when there's been a lot of time to analyze them and reflect on them and make sure they're not a hoax, and really investigate everybody involved in the timeline of the events. They do share that, often more on a local level. And then some miracles like the liquefaction of Januarius's blood, that's not a Eucharistic miracle, but things like that are on an annual basis talked about by the church. And some of the Eucharistic miracles kind of come up on an annual basis, but I kind of agree with you. I'm surprised that they don't talk about them more. They are certainly there. The stories are there. Documentaries are there. But, I wonder. I wonder sometimes if they don't really know how to treat it, if the world doesn't know how to respond to it, might actually be more of the issue. That, the media doesn't know what to make of it because, in a sense, they are so grounded in science and reality that it's hard to just say, well, this person says they saw something, isn't that nice, and we can dismiss it. It's when it moves into the realm of physical evidence that I think the world just kind of stops and stares and doesn't know what to make of it and moves on. And so there's less of a response in the media, I think.
Very interesting. Did you pick up on what Adam said, Jerry, when I was asking him about Eucharistic Miracles, Joan Carroll Cruz's book? Adam, I think you said, if I heard it correctly, that you have experienced miracles or witnessed miracles. Is there anything you can share with all of us without giving away what's in the book? Because we want the folks to get the book. This book you must have this book. You've got to have it, folks. Go to EWTNRC.com right away. Get your book. I think it's going to sell out. But Adam, can you share a little bit about what you experienced or observed?
Well, I mean, yes, Debbie, but I certainly, I don't want to pretend in any way to be special or good, and certainly not holy. So don't think that. But I did personally experience a Eucharistic miracle towards the end of a pilgrimage in Israel, a week-long, very intense pilgrimage. And I share that in the book not to point to myself at all, but I think it was kind of a signpost that God gave me at a time in my journey in getting deeper into the ministry that I'm involved in, and a signpost to me about the reality of the Eucharist. So I guess I'll leave the actual details of that to the book. But yeah, I did personally experience that. Didn't document anything because I didn't want to disturb the other people around me that were receiving communion. And it's just a personal account. I don't expect anybody to believe me. It's just a personal experience. But I thought since it was there in my life, it was valid to share it.
Yeah. Great gift, singularly to you, Adam. I'm sure you see it that way, and you're very blessed by it. We have Adam Blai on the program, Take Two with Jerry and Debbie today, and we're discussing his brand new book, just out recently from Sophia Institute Press. You'll find it at the EWTN Religious Catalog, EWTNRC.com. It's the Catholic Guide to Miracles. Now, you may be a miracle, someone curious about miracles yourself. Maybe you've got, a son or a daughter or a family member, somebody who says, oh, miracles don't really happen anymore. They never really did. It was all just, just make-believe stuff. But this book really brings them to light. And so we really strongly encourage you to get a copy of this book for yourself, for those you love, again, at EWTNRC.com. And Adam, one of the chapters that it fascinates me, because it always has, is that on incorruptibles. First, maybe we can start just explain, very rudimentary way what an incorruptible is, and then give a couple of examples, because you've got some great examples of saints whose bodies were incorrupt.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, Jerry. So I think the first thing to realize is that a lot of times when people think of incorruptibles, they think of images that they've seen of a saint's body in a glass coffin where they apparently their skin is perfect and they look like they're just literally fell asleep a moment ago. And in reality, those are basically almost all, if not all, a wax covering over the remains of the saint. The saint is not preserved in an absolutely perfect state. What incorruptible meant in the history of the church is that the body was not as decayed as much as would be expected, and particularly was still limber. So now that's not to dismiss the whole phenomenon, because there are many cases of saints' bodies who, hundreds of years after they died, with no embalming technology involved, were still completely intact. They just weren't completely perfect looking. Now, there's also many interesting stories, like, for instance, Charbel, his body stayed intact until the decision was made about his sainthood, and then basically almost immediately turned to dust. So, there's a number of examples of this lack of corruption that is present for a specific period of time, and then very quickly the body turns to dust or decays. There's also a number of cases of oil or some type of basically what smells like holy oil exuding from a body or from a crypt. So there's other interesting things that have gone along with it. There was lights around Charbel's grave that were seen by many, many people kind of like a will-o'-the-wisp, kind of lights floating around his grave for quite a period of time after he died. So, and, you know, the other thing is what's called the odor of sanctity. And so with many saints, after they pass, their body gives off a strong smell of flowers, a floral scent, which interestingly also goes along with stigmatic cases. It's one of the classic signs kind of in the church's books on valid stigmata is that the wounds and the blood that exudes from them has a very strong floral scent. So it's kind of a complex phenomenon, but that's why it's worth kind of exploring the details of it in the book. And I try to go beyond kind of the very simple presentation that people tend to see on the internet.
Mm-hmm. I'm glad you did that in the book, Adam, because my husband and I went on a pilgrimage in 2013 to Italy, to San Giovanni Rotondo, to visit the incorrupt body of Padre Pio. And I remember the pilgrims afterwards, the priest, when he met with all of us after we got to view Padre Pio, you could tell that there was that wax kind of color, coating on his face. And some of the pilgrims were very disappointed. They couldn't understand why the church chose to do that. And so do you go into that in the book, or can you share a little bit with our audience now?
Yeah, Padre Pio is one of the cases that I try to go over the details of in the book. In his case, he initially was interred, then he was moved. And one of the internments, I don't remember which one off the top of my head, there was actually, the water table was high and the tomb was flooded, which in most instances would speed up decay, and cause more rapid decay in the humidity that was involved. And so with him, he wasn't found completely perfect, but he was found remarkably preserved. And that was consistent over time. But he, like many other of the incorruptibles, wasn't in a perfect state. But that doesn't diminish the unusual phenomenon, that a body would be preserved as long as it was with him. Now, there are others, in the very early church, where you're talking about 600 years or more, without, the benefit of, like when we think of the Egyptian mummies, the very dry climate and also embalming procedures. And then, the body kind of being preserved. There are cases where the bodies were preserved for hundreds of years without embalming in a remarkable state. So, yeah, Padre Pio is one of the examples, and yes, that is a wax kind of covering on the body.
Take two with Jerry and Debbie on the special recorded broadcast with Adam Blai. Adam is a church-approved religious demonologist employed by the Diocese of Pittsburgh. Over 15 years of working and training in the exorcism ministry. He's experienced really quite a number of miracles, some of which he has been appointed to investigate by the church. And so he knows what he's talking about with regard to miracles, and it's his latest book that we're discussing, The Catholic Guide to Miracles. Be sure you pick up your copy today from EWTN's religious catalog at EWTNRC.com. That's EWTNRC.com. Another chapter I wanted you to touch upon a little bit because I think it's very, very important, and it kind of touches upon your own training and determining between the difference between supernatural events, demonic counterfeits, and mental illness. You have a training in psychology, if I have that right. You're from Penn State University. So you've done a lot of study of the human mind and all of those things. So talk about this chapter. It's chapter 9, and you say here, discerning the difference between supernatural events, demonic counterfeits, and mental illness is one of the most important things I do. Tell us about that.
Mm-hmm. Just really quickly, first off, Jerry, just so the listeners are clear, I have a master's in adult clinical psychology from Penn State, so I don't use the title psychologist. I'm all but dissertation for the doctorate. And most of my experience is in forensic settings, but my research area is brainwave analysis and consciousness. So, yes, really kind of the first important step in investigating almost any claim of unusual things is to be sure that it's not a medical problem or a psychological problem. The thing with claims of miracles is that very often it's only that person is claiming to have experienced it. So if somebody says, well, I was in that room over there alone and I saw a light and I think it's a miracle and God's talking to me, well, we don't have any objective proof of that. And so we want to make sure that, as best we can, we want to make sure that that person isn't perhaps having a problem with their visual system in their brain, whether they have a history of hallucinations, whether they were just waking up and dreaming and still seeing something. You know, that's kind of your first step in looking into things, is because it's critical, Jerry, that the much more common mental illness, misunderstanding, psychological little glitch in the brain that happens now and then, that needs to be ruled out before we go to the very rare instance of a miracle or a demonic problem. And a lot of people, they kind of make that error in their thinking. They say, well, I had an unusual experience, so it must be spiritual, it must be the devil, or it must be God talking to me, before ruling out the much more likely chance that it was a dream, that it was a mental illness, that it was a tiny little stroke, whatever it might be. We have to be rational, and we have to be critical of these things and not just jump to endorsing, like, oh, you're claiming that, so that must be God, and, you know, it kind of a very simplistic approach. And not only is it important for good thinking and critical thinking, but we don't want to do harm to people by endorsing their conclusion that something's demonic or a miracle and leave something untreated that could be, you know, getting worse. And so the example I always give for this was a real case of somebody who was seeing flashing lights every evening, and as they would go to bed, and nothing was adding up in the case, asked them to go to their doctor, and it turned out they had a small brain tumor on the occipital lobe at the back where vision is processed. And because they caught the cancer early, it was treatable and they survived. But if they had just gone with their conclusion that it was a ghost, they would have left that untreated and gone down the road of, you know, house blessings, possibly paranormal investigators, etc., and that cancer may have spread. Wow. So we don't want to do harm by jumping to the conclusion that things are spiritual.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting. Folks, you're listening to a special recorded broadcast with our dear friend Adam Blai about his new book, The Catholic Guide to Miracles. Get your book today at EWTNRC.com. That's why we're not taking calls today, because we've got Adam for the entire hour. We wanted to just dive right into why he wrote this book for us. And I'll tell you what, I just decided right now, Jerry, that I'm going to get extra books for Christmas gifts this year, Adam. So thank you. You just gave me my Christmas list, the shopping list all done with your book. So, and I just wanted to share real quickly with our listeners, if I may, EWTN Bookmark is this Saturday, 4:30 p.m. Eastern. And that's where Doug Keck talks with Catholic authors about their work and their faith. That's this Saturday, 4:30 p.m. Eastern time. Just a highlight for our listeners as well, because this is where you'll get to hear, like we're doing right today, an author, Adam Blai, and his new book, and it's super exciting. And Adam, we want to say right now, we don't want to wait till the end of the show. Thank you so much for making time for our Take Two family. You are so special to us, and your work is amazing, and we're always learning and growing from the things that you impart to us. So thank you for your ministry work, Adam.
Oh, you're too kind, Debbie. It's all God's information. So, yeah, there's nothing special about me.
He's so humble. Jerry, you see, Adam, I work with a guy who's humble, and now we've got you as a guest who's humble. Okay, I got it. I got it. You guys are trying to keep me humble. I get it. Okay. Okay, Jerry.
No, it's just reality.
Yeah. But I can't wait to give out this book. I have the book, folks, and Jerry has the book, and of course Adam has the book. He wrote the book, but we want you to get the book, right, Jerry?
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, and another thing you get into, Adam, in the book is demonic counterfeits of miracles, and I think this is something we absolutely have to know happens, because like you said, the church puts this through a very rigorous investigation, and sometimes what appears to be this beautiful gift of God, this fantastic miracle for the good of the people of God, actually is being counterfeited by demons. Can you talk a little bit about how that happens?
Sure. The devil and the demons, they're really nothing to get worked up and scared about. Don't be, disturbed by talking about that. You don't want to make it a big focus of your life, but don't have your listeners, everybody relax. The biggest area that I think is kind of a place that we need to be on guard with is false locutions and false apparitions. So the devil, he and the demons can only ape God. They can only look at what God does and do a counterfeit version of it. They're not creative. They don't come up with anything new. They've been playing the same tricks on people down through history. The same stuff over and over. And one of those tricks is to pretend to be something good. As Paul says, he can appear as an angel of light, which is a warning that he can appear to be something good. And that something good, can take the form of a false Mary, a false Jesus, a false saint, just an angel. And he can lure people into separating them from God. And that's always his end goal. His end goal is for us to be damned. And one of the ways that he can do that is to lure us away from the church. And what you'll see over time, in every generation you'll find this in most countries, there'll be little groups, little insular groups that spin off from the church, usually following an individual who claims to have messages from God. And it's a special private revelation they claim, and it's a new teaching, and it usually differs from the church in some critical but often subtle way, where it mostly sounds good, kind of from a New Agey perspective. It sounds nice and generically positive, but it actually pulls part of the critical dogma of the church out and creates this little spin-off group. And so you want to be kind of on guard when you see somebody drawing the attention to themselves. So when it's not so much about the public revelation in Scripture and through the magisterial, teaching down through time, but it becomes a personal thing. All that's well and good, but I have the direct access to God, so you need to follow me, that kind of thing. And when you find yourself starting to get into areas that are kind of bizarre and don't fit at all with Scripture, like polytheism or other heresies that the church has seen over and over down through time, what ends up happening is that group kind of spins off and says, well, we now have the truth. The church doesn't. This is the special place where God has given revelation. And, you fall into error. And these become cults in some cases, sometimes very small ones, and they inevitably spin out and, self-destruct down the road.
Yes, so it is really important to learn how to discern the difference between real miracles and demonic tricks. I think a particular area that's important for this is when we look at people claiming to have locutions or messages from God or apparitions. So what we see in every generation is there will be people that are receiving false messages and false apparitions, and they think that private revelation kind of is more important than the public revelation of Scripture and the magisterium down through time. And what ends up happening is it draws people away from God and His church and away from the Eucharist and forms a little spin-off group. And these groups are often contain heresies, teachings against the dogma of the church, and they end up becoming insular and separated from the diocese. And so sometimes you'll see letters from bishops saying that these groups are to be avoided. Sometimes the bishops haven't yet made a statement on them. But we want to be really careful about just assuming because somebody claims to have a vision or a locution, a voice from God telling them things. We want to be real careful about assuming that that's true. As St. Paul says, the devil can appear as an angel of light. He can appear as a holy figure. But what he's doing is trying to draw people away subtly from God and his church and draw them into kind of error and misunderstanding.
Wow, great stuff. Adam, thank you so much. You are a very knowledgeable man about so many things, and we thank you for putting together the Catholic Guide to Miracles. It is subtitled Separating the Authentic from the Counterfeit. Adam, thanks for being with us. We appreciate that so much, Debbie. We're going to have him back on again before too long.
Absolutely. And don't forget to join us on the Inspired by Faith Book Club. Go to standtalltoday.com. Join us. We will be featuring Adam's book this summer. Folks, we just love you. Thank you for listening. Thank you for staying with us for this entire amazing broadcast. And until we meet again, have a beautiful and blessed day. In the year of St. Joseph, please pray for us.
Amen.